Modern aesthetic landscape heavily glorifies the accumulation of massive skeletal muscle as the ultimate symbol of human dominance and optimal health. Millions of highly dedicated individuals spend hours every single day tearing muscle fibers to force unnatural physical expansion. The mainstream fitness industry actively suppresses the severe biological reality that the human brain and skeletal muscle are in a constant, brutal evolutionary war for systemic metabolic energy. The specific clinical mechanism where extreme physical size actively starves the higher cognitive centers is intentionally hidden to protect a highly profitable supplement market. The critical window of opportunity to halt this metabolic drain is shrinking rapidly today. Anyone who ignores the next few minutes of this clinical breakdown will accumulate a permanent biological debt, guaranteeing irreversible structural decay within the prefrontal cortex. Elite cognitive function mathematically demands massive caloric surpluses directed entirely toward the nervous system. The modern obsession with building extreme, unnatural muscular armor actively destroys the exact biological hardware required to maintain systemic intelligence and executive control. Highly compliant athletes blindly force their biological organism into extreme states of hypertrophy, completely ignoring the fundamental laws of human thermodynamics. Society falsely equates immense physical mass with superior genetic adaptation. The biological reality is that skeletal muscle is the second most metabolically expensive tissue in the entire human body, surpassed only by the brain itself. The human cardiovascular and nervous systems possess a strict, finite daily limit regarding how much metabolic fuel can be processed and distributed. Forcing the physical body to constantly repair and sustain massive amounts of new muscle tissue violently overrides this delicate evolutionary energy budget. The biological tax is immediate, silent, and thoroughly devastating to human cognitive longevity. The hidden clinical reality is that extreme physical size is not an indicator of optimal biological efficiency. It is a severe, self-induced metabolic crisis that forces the body into a permanent state of triage. Forcing the human organism to prioritize the growth of biceps and chest tissue fundamentally destroys the baseline metabolic rate available for the nervous system, ensuring early onset neurodegeneration. How hypertrophy drains cellular glucose. True biological dominance is strictly measured by the concentration of cellular energy distributed to the highest cognitive centers, never by the circumference of human limbs. The human prefrontal cortex, the highly evolved neurological command center responsible for advanced logic, strategic planning, and emotional regulation, absolutely requires 20% of the body's entire glucose supply simply to function at baseline. Operating a massive hypermuscular physical frame is a literal biological disaster for this highly sensitive energy system. Human evolution designed the organism to remain lean and highly efficient to ensure the brain always receives priority fueling. When the biological organism is pushed through relentless resistance training to build unnecessary mass, the newly formed muscle tissue acts as a massive metabolic parasite. It aggressively pulls massive volumes of pristine glucose and adenosine triphosphate out of the bloodstream to repair damaged cellular structures. Biological response to this severe systemic energy redistribution is violently devastating to the higher cognitive centers. The autonomic nervous system detects the massive metabolic demand from the skeletal muscle and makes a brutal evolutionary calculation. It actively reroutes the rapidly depleting glucose supply away from the highly demanding prefrontal cortex and forcefully redirects it toward the physical limbs to prevent muscular atrophy. The cerebral cortex is literally plunged into a state of severe biological starvation. The highly disciplined athlete believes an unbreakable mindset is being forged through lifting immense weight. Biologically, the exact opposite is occurring at a microscopic level. The higher executive functions are actively shutting down due to acute, localized neurohypoglycemia. Physical capacity to sustain deep, frictionless focus evaporates completely because the delicate neural networks are quite literally starved of vital metabolic fuel. Forcing the body to maintain unnecessary physical mass destroys cognitive clarity completely, locking the massive individual in a state of permanent, suffocating brain fog. Cognitive cost of mechanical trauma. Masking internal neurostarvation with the aesthetic of immense physical armor guarantees catastrophic structural decay within the fragile neural pathways. Building extreme muscle mass requires inflicting massive, constant mechanical trauma upon the physical organism. Every single intense training session intentionally creates millions of microtears deep within the muscle fibers. The immune system is forced to mount a massive, systemic inflammatory response to heal this severe physical damage. Chronic, unbroken resistance training locks the human body in a permanent state of high-level systemic inflammation. C-reactive proteins and inflammatory cytokines flood the bloodstream, eventually crossing the highly sensitive blood-brain barrier. The brain is constantly bathed in a highly toxic, highly inflammatory chemical soup generated entirely by the relentless pursuit of physical size. Toxic, unbroken flood of inflammatory markers violently attacks the hippocampus, the exact brain center directly responsible for learning, memory consolidation, and spatial navigation. The hippocampus literally shrinks under the crushing, relentless pressure of constant physical recovery. The hypermuscular individual falsely believes superior health is being achieved through endless hours of painful tissue destruction. Biologically, the delicate neural architecture is actively crumbling, losing electrical density and synaptic connectivity with every passing hour of forced recovery. The invisible biological cost of maintaining extreme physical size is rapid, irreversible cellular aging within the highest cognitive centers. Millions of massive individuals secretly suffer from severe neurotoxicity while projecting an image of absolute physical dominance. They completely lose the biological capacity to absorb complex new information or execute high-level abstract thought because their brain tissue is physically degrading under the weight of chronic systemic inflammation. The ultimate price for prioritizing aesthetic hypertrophy is a severe, measurable drop in baseline fluid intelligence. Why starved neurons execute apoptosis? The most devastating biological consequence of extreme, unoptimized muscular growth is the direct initiation of widespread cellular suicide within the human brain. Chronic metabolic starvation directly alters the fundamental survival behavior of the central nervous system, creating an environment of severe internal neurotoxicity. When delicate neurons in the cerebral cortex are consistently deprived of essential glucose because the skeletal muscle is hoarding the fuel, they sustain critical structural damage. To protect the surrounding neural network from the spread of toxic, damaged cellular material, the brain executes a violent, highly programmed biological protocol known as apoptosis. Apoptosis is the literal, mathematically precise process of programmed cell death. The starved, exhausted neurons actively trigger their own destruction sequence, breaking themselves down into fragments to be cleared away by the immune system. The individual blindly believes an unstoppable, dominant physical form is being built through sheer discipline. In severe clinical reality, the highly praised muscular aesthetic is directly causing massive cellular death in the prefrontal cortex. The human being is physically losing brain mass with every passing month of chronic, glucose-draining hypertrophy. The entire biological system is sacrificing the highest evolved organ simply to maintain unnecessary, metabolically expensive physical armor. The modern hypertrophy routine intentionally engineers a weak, docile, easily distracted mind entirely incapable of complex logical reasoning. The meathead stereotype is not a cultural joke. It is a clinical, mathematically observable biological reality caused by extreme metabolic misallocation. The ultimate biological cost of wasting finite metabolic energy on brute force physical expansion is the complete, structural, and total fragmentation of human intelligence. Systemic inflammation and brain decay. Operating a massive human body in a permanent state of tissue repair systematically destroys the delicate neurochemical balance required for elite executive function. Dopamine is the vital molecule of natural motivation, unforced drive, and intense executive focus. Healthy, sustainable dopamine synthesis mathematically requires absolute physiological calm and a complete absence of systemic inflammation. Using endless heavy resistance training to build massive size forces the autonomic nervous system into a highly unnatural, highly toxic immune state. The microglia, which act as the essential immune cells of the human brain, begin to aggressively mutate under the constant, crushing pressure of the inflammatory cytokines crossing the blood-brain barrier. Instead of quietly cleaning metabolic waste from delicate neural pathways, they become hyperactive, highly hostile immune agents operating entirely out of control. These mutated immune cells start actively attacking and devouring perfectly healthy neurons, driving severe neuroinflammation deep into the cerebral cortex. This essential cognitive command center is aggressively starved and simultaneously attacked by its own immune system. Complex logical reasoning, impulse control, and long-term strategic planning become a literal physical impossibility. The massive athlete operates continuously through thick, suffocating mental resistance, constantly dropping crucial variables and failing to process complex environmental data efficiently. The natural motivation centers of the brain physically shut down entirely to conserve finite metabolic energy for repairing the endless physical. Unforced human drive evaporates completely, leaving behind a cold, robotic shell entirely dependent on external stimulation and synthetic pre-workouts just to initiate basic action. The globally praised pursuit of infinite physical size is entirely a manifestation of a failing, heavily compromised biological machine. Restoring neural density and autonomic balance. Reclaiming absolute cognitive dominance requires completely and violently abandoning the highly toxic illusion that massive physical size equates to elite human performance. The true global elite optimize their entire biological existence solely for maximum neural horsepower, absolutely refusing to trade their central nervous system health for the vanity of extreme muscular hypertrophy. The human brain mathematically demands deep, unshakable physiological safety and a massive surplus of unshared glucose to execute brilliant, flawless, high-level abstract thought. Returning to a natural, highly efficient physical baseline is strictly mandatory immediately to halt the rapid, compounding cognitive decay. This targeted metabolic protocol instantly stops the violent neural inflammation and forcefully halts the highly destructive process of cellular apoptosis. The individual must ruthlessly eliminate the extreme caloric demands of unnecessary muscle mass to protect the vital glucose supply of the prefrontal cortex. The vagus nerve must be intentionally activated daily through profound, uncompromising stillness to break the toxic cycle of systemic inflammation and immune hyperactivity. This specific biological activation rapidly flushes toxic metabolic waste completely from the fragile neural pathways, restoring crystalline cognitive clarity. Elite executive function returns rapidly once the artificial metabolic starvation and chronic physical trauma finally end. The prefrontal cortex physically expands back to its optimal, highly dominant biological size, reclaiming full control over the highest cognitive processes. The highest global performers prioritize the intense protection of their brain mass infinitely above building an unnecessary, energy-draining physical frame. True modern power is strictly biological, highly efficient, deeply optimized, and never relies on a massive, starving physical vessel. This clinical breakdown firmly sets the required theoretical foundation for elite metabolic recovery and the restoration of optimal neural density. However, theoretical knowledge without exact, aggressive tactical execution guarantees absolute, mathematically certain biological failure. The exact, step-by-step clinical protocols required to biologically stop cellular apoptosis and safely rebuild the shattered nervous system exist right now. The mainstream fitness industry actively tries to suppress this specific recovery data entirely to maintain a compliant demographic obsessed with physical expansion. These essential clinical protocols are located directly in the description below this video right now. Go to the description immediately and access these elite optimization protocols today before the algorithm removes them. Applying these specific clinical resources guarantees the reclamation of lost cognitive dominance entirely and permanently. This eliminates neuroinflammation fundamentally and completely bypasses the exhausted, physically massive global competition. Subscribe to this channel immediately to join the absolute minority operating at peak biological efficiency. Stop trading human cognitive longevity for a severe energy-draining aesthetic that actively destroys the cerebral cortex. The critical window of opportunity to reverse this specific neural damage is closing extremely fast. Reclaim the shattered metabolic baseline today before the brain damage becomes permanent and irreversible.